everybody. We're starting this seminar tonight and our webinar, our campaign party, and we apologize for the little glitch. There must have been some glitch with the Zoom because at the last minute people were calling saying they didn't have the link. So we had to try to solve that problem. So we're running a little bit late. We apologize for that. But my name is Gene Jones and I'm president of Florida Veterans for Common Sense. And on behalf of our group, we welcome you to our annual Tom Paine birthday party to celebrate Thomas Paine, the person we call the founding father. Of course, we prefer to have a live celebration, although this Zoom gives us the opportunity to reach you as a wider audience than we could ordinarily have here in Southwest Florida. So this evening, we're proud to say that we have attendees from all around the country and some foreign countries as well. And we thank all of you for your support. We'll start the program with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Jim Dearman, a board member and chair of this year's celebration.
So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Jim. Some of you may not be familiar with Thomas Paine, although he did as much and probably more than any founder to give rise to the American idea and our democracy. In celebration of his birthday, let him tell us a little bit about himself in a video.
Hi, I'm Tom Paine. As I look back at my 250 plus years, it is obvious that every generation faces the existential threat of tyranny. My writings of 1776 are still very pertinent and very timely. My Irish colleague, John Curran, wrote in 1790, "It is the common fate of the indolent to see their rights become prey to others. The condition upon which God has granted liberty to mankind is eternal vigilance. If this is neglected, the ultimate price to pay is servitude, chains, and slavery." He also stated that the learners shall inherit the earth, or the learned are beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists. I wrote in 1776 that men who look upon themselves as born to reign and others to obey soon grow insolent, separated from the rest of mankind. Their minds are easily poisoned by their own self-importance. And when they succeed to government, are frequently the most ignorant and unfit. And remember, of more worth is one honest person to society and in the sight of God than all the crowned ruffians and dictators that ever lived. In 1776, the American army was in deep despair from frequent losses. I wrote, "Let it be told to the future world that in the depth of winter, when nothing but hope and virtue could survive, that the city and the country, alarmed at one common danger, came forth to meet it and repulse it because of the words I wrote." These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and sunshine patriot will in this crisis shrink from service of their country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of every man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. Remember, we have it in our power to begin the world all over again.
In short, Thomas Paine originated the American idea, sustained its birth, and envisioned the promise of America. Paine changed the course of history, and Florida Veterans for Common Sense is proud to stand in his legacy. Truth, reason, progress, and most of all, hope. Paine knew the struggle for truth wouldn't end with the revolution. He said, "It is the duty of every man, as far as his ability extends, to detect and expose delusion and error. As citizens, we are duty bound to protect our democracy from tyranny, mobs, and insurrectionists. If we citizens don't stand firm for truth to protect our democracy, it will be destroyed by those who propagate misinformation, lies, and conspiracy theories. As Paine recognized, we must undergo the fatigue of supporting freedom in order to keep it. Like Paine, Florida Veterans for Common Sense believes that science, truth, and reason lead the way to a better world. Paine was a self-taught engineer. In his day, when wood and stone were the common building materials, Paine invented an iron bridge. Although climate change was not an issue in Paine's day, as a man of reason and science, he undoubtedly would join with us to defeat climate change. Science shows us that global warming can be stopped. We have the technology like solar and wind to electrify our economy without burning carbon. The only thing America likes is the political will and intelligent policy to get the job done. In that regard, our environmental working group has done a yeoman's job setting out ways to win the climate change battle. You can find their work on our website under the tab Urgency and Action, Draw Down to Reverse Global Warming. Through various projects, we also work hard to help our fellow veterans and build teamwork. We'll now show you short videos produced by one of our teams, Veterans in Focus. The first video is our Vice President, Mike Burns, who will tell you about our microforest project we call SURF. The second video shows the topography, where we planted the microforest, the scope of the project, and the hard work we put into it. Also, you'll see the efforts we are making to help less fortunate veterans and veterans who get in trouble with the law.
An ancient proverb says that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So where a field once existed, where there was nothing but wild grass and weed, and where the only sound coming off that field was a gasoline-powered mower, there now exists a beautiful forest at the celery fields. The Florida Veterans for Common Sense Fund spearheaded the planting of the first microforest in the county. Thanks to the cooperation from Sarasota County and the many hardworking volunteers from the community and the magnificent teamwork from the Florida Native Plant Society, the Rotary Club of Sarasota Bay, the Audubon Society, and START, which is Solutions to Arrest Red Tide. Donations were from local businesses and individuals that helped finance the purchase of 140 some trees for this forest. And we also have about 15 different species of trees in the forest. Now, planting trees is of particular importance to veterans. The Pentagon has acknowledged that addressing climate change is a national security priority. Most experts agree that planting trees is a good way to slow global warming, which is a symptom of climate change. We believe veterans have a duty to continue to help protect our country. This first forest is our pledge to do what we can in that regard. This forest will, in a short time, begin sequestering carbon from the atmosphere, releasing oxygen into it, providing habitat for wildlife, and taking care of stormwater runoff. Already, we have seen birds checking out the bigger trees in this baby forest, perhaps looking for a future nest. The forest standing alone is a thing of beauty. pleasing to the eye, and appreciated by the community. We know because while working there, we've heard from the many people that pass by on the hill. A couple coming down from the path along the hill raised their hands and said, "Thank you." Others passing by on the level with us give us the thumbs up. Visitors to the area come down to the site where we're working and tell us they really approve of this project. Once, a young mother with a 5-year-old daughter came to the site, and while talking with her, the child went into the forest and was seen in some imaginary play dancing from tree to tree. So already, while still in its infancy, the forest is engaging the community. A Kenyan woman named Wangari Maathai, a Nobel Prize laureate who is known as Woman of Trees, wrote, "Until you dig a hole, you plant a tree, you water it and make it survive, you haven't done a thing. You are just talking." The Florida Veterans for Common Sense Fund and its partners hope to inspire others to dig a hole and plant a tree. Thank you.
Picture of our beautiful Celery Fields Park at Sarasota County, and Sarasota County has been kind enough to allow Florida Veterans for Common Sense Fund, working with several other organizations, to plant a microforest there. Here is the auger that we use to plant the trees, and a view of our volunteers spreading mulch, Fred Zukowski. Fred has just worked hours at the forest, and you can see all the various other volunteers back in the background. Our goal primarily was to build the forest as a way to combat climate change and to sequester carbon. But an incidental benefit of this is that it provides wildlife habitat and just a wonderful place for people to enjoy. The Celery Fields already is a very popular park, but this forest is going to make it even more popular. We can't work out at this forest without someone coming up and saying, "What are you doing? This is just a wonderful project." And here's another example. Our volunteer is planting a Florida coontie. In this plant, as it grows, will have a fruit which will attract wildlife. As you know, those of you that are familiar with the celery fields, a lot of it is mowed area and not very attractive to wildlife. Here's a beautiful red cedar, and it will particularly attract a bird that the Audubon will be interested in, the cedar waxwing. Here's a terrific shot of the project from overhead so you can get an idea of the scope of this project and the number of volunteers that it's taken to bring this project to success. It's just incredible, the support that we've had from all of our volunteers, and we really want to thank everybody that spent their time and energy and treasure supporting this microforest. This is really going to be, in our opinion, another little gem that Sarasota can be proud of out at the celery fields. Florida Veterans for Common Sense is a contributor to the project, and we work very closely, of course, with our sister corporation, Florida Veterans for Common Sense Fund, that initiated it.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Dearman. I'm a board member of Florida Veterans for Common Sense, and I'm happy to have you all with us for the Thomas Paine party tonight. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that our group has done, and in particular with veterans who have gotten into trouble with the law. Several years ago, our group saw a huge spike in the number of veterans that were in our county jails. And our member circuit court judge, Lee Hayworth, took it on himself to get us a $50,000 grant from the Gulf Coast Community Foundation. That grant allowed us to hire a part-time staff. And our staff went into these jails and interviewed the vets and got their stories. And then we went and got their military records. And we were very pleased when we saw them. Many of these vets that were in trouble had acts of valor, had been in harrowing combat situations. And so we were able to take those records, show them to the state attorneys and the judges, and in many cases get these vets out of jail with a probation sentence and no conviction. And so that program was called the CAVS program, Courts Assisting Veterans. And our local Sarasota County Bar Association took note of that program and awarded Florida Veterans for Common Sense a special community service award that we are very proud to have received. Again, the veterans issues focused on homeless veterans, and our group was one of the very first veterans groups to participate in the Homeless Veterans Stand Down. And that is an event where these homeless men and women can come to the event and receive many services from different parts of our community. Our group provided legal counsel to many vets who had infractions such as sleeping in the park, driving with suspended driver's licenses, trespassing, and other misdemeanors. We had judges from the 12th Judicial Circuit who helped us, and so we were able to essentially on one day wipe away all of these transgressions that homeless veterans got themselves into. And by doing that, we were able to then get them eligible for VA benefits. And our group is competent and able to connect these veterans to the VA, and surprisingly, many of them received benefits from the events at the Homeless Veterans Stand Down. So our group is very, very proud of those actions. And at this time, I'm going to introduce Hector Munez, one of our very fine members, who is going to tell you some more things that he and our group has done for homeless veterans.
Thank you, Jim. Our FLVCS Homeless Veterans Committee provides direct help to homeless veterans. We have provided clothing, pots and pans, along with other assorted household goods that we purchased at local stores for homeless vets. We have helped homeless vets get started in their own business, as well as helping some homeless vets with direct rent payments. We have even helped cleaning housing units to make them livable. These are examples of direct support we provide to homeless veterans. But we have bigger plans, and I'd like to introduce Pete Cannon to tell you all about it.
We've been very busy working on the biggest project our organization has ever undertaken. Here's an overview. We're working to build 75 plus housing units, literally a veterans village, for homeless and disabled vets in the Sarasota area. We, in this case, is a brand new coalition that we've put together. It's called the Veterans Housing Coalition, and there are some phenomenal people and organizations who've stepped up to help us, all with building and management experience. William Russell, CEO of the Sarasota Housing Authority. Scott Westhoff, VP of the Military Officers Association of the United States. Brian McCarthy from Mission United, part of the United Way. Rich McDaniel, head of Vet Services at JFCS. Barb Bernhardt, a builder of low-cost, affordable housing in several countries and a World War II vet. And Errol Buntsman, another vet who is currently building 128 housing units for farm workers down in Immokalee. Plus, Jean and I and members of our group have personally met with and gotten support from key members of our community, from the major foundations as well as private philanthropists, from the Suncoast Coalition to End Homelessness, from Harvest House, from Jewish Family and Children's Services, from Turning Points, from Minnesota Veterans, etc., etc. And we're also working with one of the largest real estate companies in Florida who is helping us find the right land for this big project, and they're not charging us a penny. Now, let me be honest and tell you there's a fly in the ointment. The COVID pandemic has set us back at least a year. All the foundations have become busy feeding people, helping people who've lost their jobs, which has got to be their number one priority at this point. But we're getting rolling again, and we'll keep you up to date on our progress as 2021 unfolds. Thank you.
As you can see from these videos, we're a very active group, but now it's my pleasure to introduce Jeff Morris. Jeff is one of our founding members. He's a Vietnam vet, and he's our treasurer of Florida Veterans for Common Sense. Jeff will in turn introduce Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman for our presentation of the award tonight. Jeff?
Good evening. I am Jeffrey Morris, a board member of the Florida Veterans for Common Sense. I have the pleasure of presenting the Tom Paine Award to tonight's guest speaker, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, retired. Each year, we acknowledge an American whose conduct and actions exemplify the courage of America's greatest patriot, Tom Paine, the author of Common Sense. Tom Paine did so despite the risks to his career and even his life. Common Sense was the manifesto that energized America to break free from the tyranny of King George and Great Britain. The fickle majority of American colonists, once excited at the Declaration of Independence, had dwindled to a courageous minority in the resistance. The reason for the inaction were the same as in any resistance movement. Today, or in 1776, the concerns over daily bread, family safety, and a lack of grit or courage for the cause of freedom that presented too many risks. Less well known was Mr. Paine's statement: the more men have to lose, the less they're willing to venture. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman's sin was reporting to his superiors 2 attempts by administration officials to pressure Ukrainian President Zelensky to launch an investigation into President Trump's political opponent, Joseph Biden. One of these events involved a personal call between President Trump and President Zelensky. Because of his testimony, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman was vilified and denounced by President Trump and repeatedly attacked by Republican lawmakers and television commentators. He was ostracized by the United States Army, denied promotion to full colonel, and denied a previously offered slot at the U.S. Army War College. A short time later, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman retired from the Army. His attorney described a campaign of bullying, intimidation, and retaliation by the Trump administration as the reason for Lieutenant Colonel Vindman's retirement. President Trump tweeted that he ousted Lieutenant Colonel Vindman for insubordination and, quote, and for doing a lot of bad things, end of quote. President Trump's former chief of staff, retired Marine General John Kelly, defended Lieutenant Colonel Vindman's actions in testimony in stating, he did exactly what we teach them to do from cradle to grave. He went and told his boss exactly what he heard. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman's testimony before the House Intelligence Committee was corroborated in previous testimony by Fiona Hill, his supervisor and a former official at the United States Security Council, and William Taylor, acting ambassador to the Ukraine. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman was awarded a Master of Arts degree in Russian, Eastern Europe, and Central Asian Studies from Harvard's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. He is a doctoral student and a Foreign Policy Institute Fellow at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, a Pritzker Military Fellow at Brookings Lawfare Institute, a non-resident fellow at the University of Pennsylvania's Perry's World House, and the author of the forthcoming memoir, Here, Right matters. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman retired, served on the National Security Council as the Director for Eastern European, Caucasus, and Russian Affairs Officer for the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and as a military attaché in the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. In addition, he was awarded the Distinguished Honor Graduate of the Command and General Staff College and recipient of the Distinguished Writing Award of the Joint Forces Staff College. He is also a recipient of the Combat Infantryman Badge, Purple Heart, 4 Army Commendation Medals, 2 Legions of Merit, and 2 Defense Meritorious Medals. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman is married to former Rachel Cartmill of Edmond, Oklahoma, and they have 1 daughter, Eleanor Abigail. Prior to his testimony before the House Intelligence Committee, he stated, quote, "Dad, my sitting here today in the U.S. Capitol talking to our elected officials is proof that you made the right decision to leave the Soviet Union and come here to the United States of America in search of a better life for our family. Do not worry, I will be fine for telling the truth." When asked why he had the confidence to tell his father not to worry about his testimony, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman's response was, "Congressman, because this is America. This is my country. I have served and defended that all my brothers have served, and here right matters." Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, we, the members of the Florida Veterans for Common Sense, consider you a hero. Ladies and gentlemen, the recipient of this year's Thomas Paine Award, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for that excellent introduction. Sounds like you were talking about somebody else for most of it. Gene, also, thank you and your leadership team for considering me for this honor. Right before we actually started this program, I mentioned that out of all of the recognition and support that I receive, the most important, the most meaningful support has come from my fellow service members and veterans. And let there be no mistake, there was plenty of it. Frankly, there was an enormous amount of support that I received from former senior officers, retirees, veterans, and active duty 06 and below. Plenty of support from that level. I remember as a senior captain many years ago at this point, my favorite speech was by a general whose name I no longer remember. He's the commanding general of First Corps in Fort Lewis. And we were standing out on a massive parade field with the rain pouring down. And his simple comments of, "We run in the sun, we train in the rain, and we fight in the night" was sufficient remarks for all of us standing out there. I won't be quite so brief, but I will keep that in mind as I kind of continue to talk. I'll tell you that when I tend to engage, in these kind of public events, my theme is about public service and the fact that we should all consider opportunities to do something bigger than ourselves. It doesn't have to be military service. It could be any number of different things. Community service, volunteering at schools, whatever the case might be. But I could dispense with most of those comments. You guys know this better than me. Just listening to the remarks before I started speaking, it was amazing to hear the kinds of projects that you're undertaking and the impacts that you're having on your community from something as massive as affecting climate change. That you guys are obviously, there are no bounds. You're going to make your contribution felt. I think that was Mike that was talking about. That was pretty awesome. And or just helping your local vets, whether it's folks that have had trouble or housing, whatever the case might be, the basic necessities. So I need not say anything else, but I will maybe offer a couple things. I mean, when I left the military, there were a couple of markers I put down for myself. In my first frankly, public statement since appearing before Congress. I wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post. In there, I said I wanted to continue to work on advancing U.S. national security interests, hence my doctoral studies at Johns Hopkins. I'm writing on great power competition. What is it that are most important adversaries, the Russia, the China, the emerging adversaries of the world are doing that we need to be concerned about, and how do we, what kind of policies we should be advancing to meet those challenges. The second item was public service, which I intend to be a lifelong public servant, whether that's in government or out of government. This is just going to be something that's going to be a part of me. It has been a part of me, and it will continue to be a part of me. And I will look to the example of the Florida Veterans for Common Sense as an example of, frankly, what I can continue to do, as I move forward with my life. And the third item I would leave for your consideration is we all have a role to play in seeking accountability of our leadership, of our government officials. Today is a tough day. The wheels of justice move very slowly, as we saw that the Senate failed to convict the president and prevent him from, frankly, offer the kind of rebuke that was warranted given the insurrection and attempted coup on January 6th. So while that didn't happen, and unfortunately, Florida's senators were complicit in that, we each have a role that we can play with regards to advocating for public servants with ethics and values, and making sure that those are the basic expectations for the public servants at the local, state, and federal level. So I think there's something for all of us to do in that space. You might notice by my background, I'm actually a neighbor of yours right now. I'm in the Panhandle. My family's has a vacation. For me, it's a change of venue, since I basically transported my home office and continue to do my reading and writing and everything from here. But I guess I'm going to claim Florida, whether it's now or in the future, and consider myself part of your team. And thank you once again. I really appreciate your support. This is what's allowed me to get through, I think, much of the difficult periods, just the groundswell of support from Americans across the country. And I very much appreciate learning from you and what you're doing in your communities. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alex. We appreciate it very much. And what we would like to do, if you would work with us on this, there's several questions that have been submitted, and we'll let our good leader, Rich Scissors, present those questions to you, if we may.
Yes, please. Looking forward to it.
Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, first of all, thank you for your inspiring and cogent remarks. The first question is, how did your upbringing as a Russian immigrant and a naturalized citizen influence your desire to serve your adopted country and make the military a career?
You know, that's interesting. It's in writing my memoirs, this is something that I've thought about, and there's a kind of answer that seems maybe a little bit prideful. It's the notion that there's something different about immigrants that come here and have a different experience before coming here that offers greater appreciation for the United States and public servants. That might be true, but what I've learned through my own military career, 21 and a half years, you know, the military has a small subset of immigrants, or the children of immigrants, that account for a fraction of those that choose to serve. And I think there's something else. I think it's a common experience that I haven't quite identified, that we all share as fellow veterans that called us to serve in the military at one point or another. I think part of that for me was the excitement of serving in the military, doing something very different. I was restless coming out of university, too much energy to try to apply to some sort of office environment. I started out as an infantryman. Actually, spent some time right down the road here on Santa Rosa Beach, Florida phase of Ranger School. But that was very important to me, and frankly, the military helped me much more than I probably contributed to the military, because it gave me the discipline. Somehow I sensed that earlier on. I think I said I needed kind of some of that military discipline and rigidity to order my mind, and over the course of a long career, contribute back in some sort of way. So immigrant background was important. I think that's probably why all of my brothers and I served at one point or another. We understood our family background, and what we had to reckon with. We understood we came here as refugees, so we certainly understood that the Jewish people were being persecuted, and in this country, Jewish people could thrive. So that was well understood. But I think there's something else. Again, this one unknown that ties us all together as fellow veterans. Hopefully, you guys may have a better idea of what called us all to serve for whatever period of time we did.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. The next question is, what is your view of pushing NATO into Eastern Europe and its NATO's long-term prospects?
Yep. What's interesting is that sometimes we lose sight of the fact that NATO is a collective defense organization, which means that it's enhancing security for the members of NATO and prepared to defend against aggressors. So it's not offensively minded. It's not geared towards threatening any other wannabe regional hegemon, which is exactly what our adversaries try to paint the organization to be. It's defensive in nature, and it's enhancing security both within the NATO states, but also regionally. There are missions all over, frankly, both in Africa and the Middle East that NATO contributes to. I had this conversation actually amongst a group of experts and academics, really just last week, about the merits of NATO, and there are concerns that somehow NATO precipitated our adversarial relationship with Russia. That that was what initiated this cycle of hostilities. I take a completely different view of it. The way I see it is Russia has always employed coercive tools. Short break of time when it was weak in the 90s and it didn't have the means to do that. But at almost any other point in its history, it's been an aggressor. And the reason for that is they've always had this idea of trading space for time. They've been the victims of assaults throughout their long history. And the way they deal with that is they try to expand the security zone by pushing further and further away from the core. And now, understanding this aspect, I recognize that if NATO wasn't there, Russia would continue to be an aggressor, continue to approach more core, vital, if you were, national security interests. And we would be dealing with a NATO that's closer to home, closer to affecting the countries that are our most important trading partners. And it would just pick off those countries on the eastern borders of Europe. It would employ its propensity for coercive tools to extract concessions, whether they're economic or political, prevent them from asserting their sovereignty, and we would have a much more difficult time if we didn't have NATO.
Thank you. The next question is, what is the U.S. military leadership's view on Russian bounties?
I think what we have is a military that since that story broke in March of 2020, which is just about a month or so, or at least those were the initial reports, about a month after I left the White House. What we have is a military leadership and a Department of Defense that was extremely concerned about running afoul of the president of the administration. And in so doing, they couldn't frankly express their views, their deep concerns about the Russians putting bounties on American service members. The reason this is frankly so important is that Russians have not usually been, they've never been this bold in attacking US interests directly. They've attacked us through proxies, they've done all sorts of nefarious things, but there was always a stark, a very bright red line that they wouldn't cross. They could conduct, chemical attacks in Salisbury in the UK. They could assassinate, dissidents in Georgia without much fear. But they never crossed the threshold of attacking the U.S. Directly. And what we have is a deterrence, an erosion of deterrence in Russians attacking us as directly as they have, frankly, from 2016 onward. And the Biden administration is going to have a hell of a hard time reestablishing deterrence. That's a roundabout way of answering your question about what the military feels. I think there are some challenges, and I think there's going to have to be some introspection amongst senior military leaders that were tacitly complicit in the kinds of activities that this past administration undertook, and that in being quiet about those missteps, about those transgressions, they enabled the administration. They enabled things like Lafayette Square, the suppression of the protesters there. And I think that's the leadership. I would hope that the incoming civilian leadership at DOD is taking a careful look at it. General Austin certainly is familiar with how the military operates. He understands probably the shortfalls there, but more importantly, his senior military or his senior political advisors, the civilian leadership, will take a very careful look at who's in what leadership position, how they performed most recently.
Thank you. The next question, which kind of is a lead on from your previous answer, is what advice would you give President Biden in dealing with Vladimir Putin?
I think I've written about this a little bit. I think there are some key things, key policy changes that the president's going to have to undertake. The first one is we should always recognize that there needs to be an open channel communication so that we could underscore US interests and our resolve to defend those interests. The Russians, only through dialogue will the Russians understand that attacks, continued cyber attacks, like the solar wind attacks, solar winds attack that occurred in the fall timeframe, or actually was ongoing, but was revealed in the fall timeframe. Only through that kind of dialogue, or bounties, or whatever the case might be, only through dialogue will be able to communicate those things pretty clearly. And it doesn't have to be public. It could be private. It could be underscoring the way the president almost certainly did when in his first conversation with Vladimir Putin, that there'll be consequences to Russian attacks on US interests. But there also needs to be, if that's the, Theodore Roosevelt speak softly but carry a big stick approach, there also needs to be a stick. And the stick is what I like to refer to as reciprocal actions. So the Russians believe right now that they could conduct cyber attacks on the United States, and they believe that they could act with impunity, that there'll be little consequences because we won't take the same kinds of responses. They believe that they could interfere in domestic affairs in the United States, and that we won't do the same thing in Russia. And for periods of time, we actually that's true. That's the correct assessment. They drew that conclusion from experience. But we're in another time, and the kinds of threats the Russians are posing by invigorating, by nurturing disinformation and fracturing the cohesiveness of the United States, it's too severe for us to kind of dismiss and wave our hands, say that it's not a big deal. So we need to take a much harder line with regards to responding in certain ways, like for Russian behavior.
Thank you. The next question is, what is your opinion on the use of force over the past 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq?
So I know this one's close to home for your organization. I served in Iraq. That was my combat experience. It's really, really hard to justify that particular conflict. The underlying basis for our involvement was weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist, that Saddam Hussein had basically dispensed with on fears that that might cause another Iraq war. And even in spite of that, getting rid of those weapons, we still invaded. It's hard to dispense with the instability that our activities in Iraq have caused throughout the region. Some potentially you could argue good with regard. I mean, the butterfly effect of our involvement potentially having a positive effect on Arab Spring and Tunisia turning more democratic, but far more disastrous effects in Yemen and Syria. And so that's there are too many issues to catalog for Iraq, especially with this idea that somehow American hubris, unfortunately, in this regard of nation building and the fact that we can somehow, apply sufficient resources, which we too often don't have the willpower to follow through on, to make those kinds of lasting changes. I mean, we could claim success for Japan and the Marshall Plan in Europe, but we poured a lot of resources, and we had it was a completely different set of circumstances. Afghanistan, frankly, I would say is a different kind of war. It was a safe haven for Al Qaeda and a safe haven for radical Islamists. And we had a job to do to protect U.S. interests. I think this would be going too far afield, but you could argue the merits of whether we should still be involved in Afghanistan nearly 20 years later, or if we had we come up with more reasonable objectives, we could have found our way out of Afghanistan. But that conflict is going to end eventually. And I think, frankly, to Afghanistan's benefit, that the U.S. was involved. You can't make that same claim for Iraq.
All right. Thank you very much. The next question is, what was the effect on military morale of you and your brother's removal from the National Security Council?
I think at the at the level of colonel and below, I think it's hard to swallow an officer that seemingly did the right thing, lived up to the Army values, and then to kind of be either hung out to dry, or in this case it was probably more along the lines of they just decided to stay quiet. I mean, they just nobody said anything while I was under attack by the president, by the media. When the Department of Defense wants to make its position heard, they'll make it heard. They'll say the officer's in good standing, excellent career. He wouldn't have been at the National Security Council if he hadn't, he didn't earn it, things of that nature. They just decided to stay quiet because they didn't want to silhouette themselves and potentially be the victim of another reprisal by the president, which he had taken that kind of action. But that obviously takes some courage to do that, to risk your own career, to protect your subordinates. And I think that's probably my biggest criticism of senior leadership, is that they miss the opportunity to protect the Army values, to live up to the Army values. And I refer to the Army values, but the Navy and the Air Force have their own values that are, basically the same. And I think we're probably going to, I'm not sure if many people will think about me specifically, but there'll probably be some rebuilding to do to kind of indicate that, the Army actually believes in these things and will fight for them and protect these values. And I think that's going to be something that the Army is going to have to grapple with, for the foreseeable future. It showed itself to be kind of a little bit weak in this regard. And again, in my view, you could draw a direct line between that kind of, quiet complicity to Chairman Milley and Secretary Esper being paraded through Lafayette Park to suppress civilian protesters in June. That's what concerns me.
Thank you. The next question is, If President Biden called, would you accept a recommissioning as colonel?
You know, it's interesting. That's an interesting question. I think there's an element of justice in having things kind of like, having the Trump administration's retaliation exposed. What I mean by that, and a lot of this hasn't even become public yet, but just the week that I was getting ready to I had to make my final decision to retire. I was fence sitting for a long time, really pissing off my wife, frankly. I should have gotten out months ago, but I refused. I was stubborn. I was like, okay, I'm supposed to be going to war college. I know I'm being promoted to colonel. Do I still have a career? I want to see my name on the promotion list come out. You guys definitely understand that. And I waited. My request for orders came in on June 8th. I waited until July 8th to drop my retirement paperwork because I knew that as long as I was in that promotion list wasn't, and Trump was in office, that promotion list wasn't going to move forward. I knew that my friends that I'd served for decades with weren't going to get promoted or weren't going to find out whether they had been promoted and could make decisions about moving on and retiring if they were passed over. And I knew that as long as Trump was in office, that I'd be a target and stigmatized. I also did my own due diligence and spoke to all the seniors that I've developed relationships with over a long career. The folks that were hired were extremely supportive and wanted me to stay in, but the senior military officers, the senior foreign area officer in my career field, said that I was basically done. There's not an opportunity to take a knee as a colonel and still contribute in the most significant way in the most important countries in the world. I could kind of ride out the next 10 years potentially just hanging out somewhere and enjoying 10 years of colonel pay, but that's not what I was interested in doing. I wanted to continue to have an impact. And then another 3-star that's now a 4-star told me that I'd flown too close to the sun, that I would have to take a rehabilitative assignment. Certainly I had pissed off some senior officers either by somehow stumbling into being a public figure, which wasn't my intent, or ran afoul of their political views. And I knew that given all those hurdles, there was no way that really could continue to on the same trajectory that I had been on. Being a lieutenant colonel on the National Security Council is pretty good. What's interesting about that position, and most people don't know it, is that your peer group is deputy assistant secretaries, 2-star equivalents. So those, I would, if I had made the commitment to take a knee, get back into the colonel pipeline, take another several assignments, and see if I could be competitive for the next grade. I had decided that in my mind, because at one point I was considering my options. When I went over 20 while I was on the National Security Council. But I wanted to continue to contribute in the military. It turns out that, after all this unfolded and the president proceeded to, attack me, that was no longer an option. And I think that we all know that the military tends to be pretty conservative. They don't like their lieutenant colonels or colonels having a bigger, public profiles than they do. It would be hard to reconcile and go back in the military. But, I don't know. I'll wait until I'm asked.
Well, thank you. We have, I guess we're coming close to the top of the hour. We have a few more questions from.
I'll rapid fire if you want.
Okay, great. Yeah. So the first one is, what is your opinion on the extent of right-wing thinking within the military? Something which prompted the recent stand-down day by the Secretary of Defense.
I think that there's the military is representative of the United States to a large extent, as you all know, and I think that there are the most kind of fringe elements. The folks that we saw on January 6th attacking the Capitol are also represented in the military, but they also, that was the people that were on the streets in the Capitol are a infinitesimal portion of the entirety of the U.S. population. So yes, there are people that are fringe and potentially don't represent army values, or maybe irreconcilable with the military. And I think I would hope to see that the military find a way to resolve their status and move them out. But in general, I don't think that we have a particularly radical military. Again, I think they're representative. Everything that I've seen suggests, and this is anecdotal in my own experience, but also in statistics suggests that the president lost a enormous amount of support over his 4 years due to incompetence, failing to protect the military's interests. And I think that's frankly, that is less prominent because there are some narratives around how many people in the military were around January 6th, but it's still kind of a very small percentage.
All right, thank you. The next question is, does Radio Free Europe still have relevance?
It does. It's an excellent organization. I had the privilege to work with them throughout my career as a foreign area officer. It's, I mentioned this idea of reciprocal actions and Russian interference in U.S. domestic affairs. There is a channel called RT, used to be known as Russia Today. It's a major outlet and puts out Russian propaganda. And we tended to, we basically, after the end of the Soviet Union, stopped leveraging Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty Europe to denounce, bad behavior. I think there's potentially new relevance if we employ Radio Free, Radio Liberty Europe in the same way that we did back then, and indicate that we will protect our interests. And if you attack us here and try to sow discord, in a ripe, developed democracy, you're actually heading for trouble as an authoritarian state. And we see protests throughout Russia at the moment. But even so, it does support kind of very good practices with regards to journalism and so forth. There's a lot of benefits to Radio Free Europe.
All right, thank you. The next question is, all of us are deeply concerned by recent reports about Russia's hacking of various government agencies. What can the U.S. do to retaliate against Russia and to secure our digital resources?
That's a tough one. I'm not a tech guy. I tend to be kind of the 50,000 foot level guy. But I have been spending some time in the space. Actually 1,200 feet, the jump altitude for infantrymen. But I would say that one of the things that I'm starting to come around to, and this is speaking to a number of experts, is this notion of an insecure, starting with the premise of an insecure internet. If you start with the premise of an insecure internet, and every time somebody conducts a transaction, it has to be authenticated. That puts us on a whole different starting point than this idea of trusted networks, where you log in and then you have access to everything in some sort of network just because you passed one security barrier. So this idea is that you're continuously, it might have some impact on productivity, but if you start with the premise that things are insecure, potentially compromised, and have to be authenticated on a regular basis, that is probably a good starting point to help secure the internet. And the other thing that we need to do is goes back to my premise of deterrence. If our adversaries feel like they could act with impunity, no consequences, they'll do so. If they feel like there'll be consequences and costs, they will be a little bit more careful.
Thank you. And the final question is, what are your plans for the future after your fellowship?
Yeah, so I think this goes back to the three kind of pillars of activity that I mentioned earlier. I was very fortunate that when I left the military, I actually didn't have, I made my decision at the last possible minute. If I had not made a decision on July 8th, I would have been bound by 3-year commitment, 1 year in war college, and 2-year additional duty service obligation. but what I did have when I made my decision is I had the dean of the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins say, if you want to come here and work on your doctorate, we will have you. So at least I had that. I knew I had a pension. I knew I'd be able to do certain things on the back end. I was very hopeful. And I think the reason I could do that is because my dad came here with 4 boys, or 3 boys actually, and a mother-in-law that didn't like him. And he came here with $759 and started from scratch without really the facility in language. I had an Ivy League education. I had pension. It's not enough to live on, especially in the DC area. And I had the prospect of going to advance my studies. Now, I've got my feet, my toes into, you heard the bio, into a bunch of different pots. I could go into academia. I've got some consulting projects that I'm working on that help make everything comfortable. I'm a military fellow at Brookings Lawfare Institute. So these are different things I'm testing out, and I'll decide what to do. I probably have one more stint in government at some point or another also, but we'll see how that turns out.
Well, thank you for all your great answers, and I'll turn it back over to Gene.
Thank you very much, Rich. And Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, I would like to say that it's an honor to us to be able to present this award to you. And I'm getting feedback as you've been answering the questions in your presentation. And it's been just so positive. And it's just really wonderful to see that we have people that are willing to serve our government in the legacy of Thomas Paine. And we thank you so much. And Jeffrey was exactly correct. We consider you a hero. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
And then moving on, every year we do something special. We have, as you could tell from our group, the many things that we do, we have so many people that work hard every day. But this year there's been somebody that made a special impact on our group. And he does the type of things, some of the other members of the group don't know this, but I call people up and ask them to do things and to work with me on things. And there's some people that I can call on, and it's like being in the military. They never say no. So our service continues. And one of those persons who will do some work that sometimes some people might even consider nasty work, but he does it with a smile. He gets it done, and we're just so proud of him, and he's so proud that he's in our group. And that's Hector Munoz, and we have Volunteer of the Year shirt for Hector. Hector, great job this year. Hector, would you like to say anything? Unmute yourself if you do.
I'm shocked. I had no idea, and thank you. I'm grateful and to be on the same stage as Colonel Vindman. I'm honored, really. Thank you so much.
You earned it.
Thank you.
Well, Hector, we have to say that the one thing that we really admire about you is that you always pitch in with a smile. Some people might do it, but they're going to whine a little bit, but you never do, and that's very appreciated.
I don't let you see me whining.
Spoken like a true Vietnam vet. Okay, Rich, back to you. Could you do our raffle, please, sir?
Yes. Please buy 50/50 raffle tickets to help support Florida Veterans for Common Sense projects like you heard about tonight. The holder of the winning raffle ticket will get half of the pot. The remaining money will be split evenly between Florida Veterans for Common Sense and Florida Veterans for Common Sense Fund. Single tickets are $5, 5 tickets are $20, and 10 tickets are $35. There is no limit on the number of tickets you can buy. Tickets are on sale until noon on Friday, February 19th. Ticket purchasers will be emailed their ticket numbers. The raffle drawing will be held on Monday, February 22nd, during the Florida Veterans for Common Sense monthly meeting. You do not need to be present to win. The meeting, held via Zoom, will feature former state representative Margaret Good. To purchase raffle tickets, go to flvcs.us/raffle, where you can also find all of the raffle rules and register for the monthly meeting on February 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. And what I would like to say in addition to that is that the money that we make from our wonderful sponsors for this event tonight, and also from our raffle sales, 50% of those are going to go to our sister corporation, Florida Veterans for Common Sense Fund, our 501c3. And that's the organization that's primarily responsible for the surf project, the microforest project that Mike talked about. And it's made us very happy that the community's responded very positively to what we're doing. And several different groups have come to us and asked us to do more of these projects. And we can't do that without the support of all you good people and sponsors of the events like tonight. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank you for attending tonight. And what we're going to do is try something a little bit different, and we're going to close up the meeting with a toast to Thomas Paine. And before we close, I just want to say one more time, Colonel Vindman, you are our hero, and your courage is something to be emulated by all of us. So good evening and enjoy the toast to Tom Paine.
Thank you.
Every year, Florida Veterans for Common Sense gathers together to honor the life and work of Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was an English immigrant coming to the colonies in 1774 and went to work for Ben Franklin. He quickly became involved in the politics of the day, writing the works Common Sense and the Crisis Papers. Those two works essentially turned a tax revolt into a revolutionary war. He was so important that another founding father, reportedly John Adams, said of him, "Without the pen of Paine, Washington's sword would have been wielded in vain." Importantly, his words were used to inspire Washington's troops before the Battle of Trent. The words start out with, "These are the times that try men's souls." Paine's other works included the Agrarian Rights and the Rights of Man, in which he advocated for Social Security, a free public education for all, women's suffrage, and the abolition of slavery. He even gave us our name. He even put his reputation and life on the line when he turned in a person who was skimming money in our dealings with France, Silas Deane. It is for these reasons that we pick an annual award recipient who embodies the life of Thomas Paine in their life's work. This year it's Colonel Alexander Vindman. So in the spirit of Thomas Paine, we honor Alexander Vindman, and we raise our glasses and toast Mr. Thomas Paine.
And we'd like to thank you. And with that, we'll call the meeting to an end and thank everybody for attending and thank you for your support. And we hope you'll join either as a veteran or a veteran friend and work with us. We'd really appreciate it. So good night.